All right. So we created the backend that returns a JavaScript web token with our username and ID. Now let's attach this to the front end. So what I just did is here we have our backend, which consists of our Django project, and then I created a front end application, literally just called front end, and this is where our React application will reside. So what I did was npx create React app front end. So that's what created this application or this React app. And then I also installed React Router DOM because we're going to need that as well. So inside of our app.js, let's go ahead and utilize the routes. So in here, let's just create some routes first. So what do we want to create in our app.js? We want to create a home page, a login page, and a sign up page. So before we actually go ahead and create those routes, let's go ahead and just create those pages similar to what we've kind of been doing in the past. So I'm going to create a folder just called pages. And inside of this folder, I'm going to create a home page.js, RCS, home page initially, and then I'm going to create, a login page JS RCS, and then just say login page, and then also create a sign up page.js RCS, created a sign up page. So I created our 3 pages, and inside of our app.js, let's include our router. So import, is it router, browser router? I'm just gonna browser router route from React Router DOM. And then in here, we can actually go ahead and create our different routes. So browser router, we can create a route, exact path equals just there, and we want a component, we'll want to do the homepage component, and it automatically added it there. And then we'll go ahead and create a login and sign up. Login page, and also a sign up. And then we'll sign up page. Questions about what I just did to create the routes and the homepage, login page, and sign up page? So if you come back here, we have go to localhost 3000, we have the home page. If we go to localhost /login, we get the login page, and then the sign up page. Questions so far? Nope. All right, so now let's first, how do we want to do this? Where do we want to store? I'm not going to use React hooks like the context hook or anything right now. I'm just going to do everything just through state and passing state down. So where do we want to store our user once a user is signed in? Anybody?
You could just store it in state, like just use state and just make like a user, set user.
Okay, perfect. Yep. So let's import React. Let's do use state. Let's also import use effect because we're going to need that. And we're doing that from React. So at the very top level of our app, we can assign a couple of things. We can have our user, set user, use state, and initially it's going to be set to null. And then I'm going to create another state variable called is logged in, which is going to be a true Boolean value, is logged in. And I'm going to be able to pass that down. Instead of passing down the entire user, I'm just going to create an is logged in and pass that down as well. And initially, it's going to be false. All right. So if I wanted to pass these, the state down to like home page or login page, etc., or sign up page, how can I do that in the app? Anybody? How do I pass state down from the app.js down to a child component through like a route?
You need to use the render, like you put the render attribute inside the route, and then you can make a function outside of it to pass in props or whatever.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So we're going to be passing in props to the login page and sign up page. So with that, let's first try to get a login user. All right. So let's just say render const render login page. And this is going to return just the login page or the login component. And then we're going to be passing down some props down. So maybe like is logged in equals is logged in. And we're going to also pass down the user. So if we go to the login page, we can pass in props and we can console log the props in the login page. Come over here, go to login, open up the console right there. And so inside the login page on line 4, we have, do we even console login page? Oh, looks like render login page. We're not doing that. We're not actually rendering it. So I need to use that render property and then call this function render login page. So if I come back here, I get is logged in and the user is null. Questions about that?
What's the difference between render and component there, Tom?
So component literally only takes in a component. So sign up page is in fact a component, where the render takes in a function that returns a component.
Okay, got it.
Cool. All right. So what else do we need to do? So we need to pass in some information, so which we are doing. Now we actually have to create an API to talk to our backend to log in a user. So I'm going to create another folder called API. API, and then create a user API file. And this user API is going to just handle the login. So I can const login. It's going to take in like the user's credentials. So like, or like a user object, which will be the username and password. And this is where I'll return. Should I do async await, or what do you want to do? Let's do async await. Oh, that's in the wrong spot. Async. And then we can say let response equals await fetch, and then in here, what's the route that we want to do to log in a user from their backend? It's going to be this token auth. So inside that fetch, we want to pass in the token auth URL. And here, we want to do the type of method. It's going to be a post. The headers, we're going to use content type, application, JSON, and then finally the body, what we're actually passing in is the JSON stringified of the user credentials. And then let's actually just return the response. We'll see if that works. And if it doesn't, we'll debug it. Cool. So there's the login. And now inside our app.js, let's actually handle the login. Const handle login, which will take in, make this async, takes in the event. And in here, we'll want to actually call this user's API. So at the very bottom of our API, we want to export default. Is it exports default? The login. All right, that looks good. So inside of our handle login, we can call let response equals await user API. There it goes. It just automatically imported it. .login. And this is going to take in like the user object or the user credentials. Just use that. It's the same. But before we take in user credentials, we actually have to create that user credentials, which is essentially it's just an object. So we take in the username, would be event.target. Let's just say username.value, and we're going to have to create this. And then we'll also need the password. At the very top of this event or this handle login, we want to do event.prevent default. And then let data equals await.response.json. And then let's just console log the data right now. We might want to do something with it later. So we created the handle login function in our app.js, but we're going to want to pass it down to the login page. So we can say handle login. So now in our login page, if we see if everything's working, if we refresh it, we have this handle login function right here. So now we can then go ahead and actually edit our login page to include the form to actual login. So I'm just going to copy this form. So actually make this an H1. Format the document. So in here, taking the props, we're console logging the props. We have an H1 tag that says login page. We have a form that calls the handle login page. And then we have a label that says user. We have the input text where the name is username. So this is, we're going to actually be entering in the username. We have another label called password. which is an input field for password. We have a button submit. Then at the very end, we have a link to go to our home or go to our sign up page. So we're going to also have to import link from React Router DOM. Questions about that logic? So here we go. We have our username, the placeholder Ron Burgundy, and our password. So when we click submit, it'll call this props.handleLogin function, which comes up here, calls this, takes in the event, prevent default, create a user credential object, which assigns the username value to the username key and the password to the password key. And then it passes that user credential into the login method here, into the user API, and then we execute that information or execute this API and then just return with the response. And once we return with the response, we decipher that or convert it to a data object, and then now we're just console logging it. Questions about how that kind of process the data flow? What questions do you have, I should ask?
We're going to go over how to restrict access to certain areas of the page.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll have some conditional rendering in there.
Okay.
Yep. So the next thing I need to do, I need to actually run my backend server. So I'm going to create a new terminal. I'm currently in the front end. I need to CD in the back end, list everything out. Python, or I need to source venv bin activate this, and then Python manage.py run server. So I've got the backend server running. I got the local host for React running, and now everything's working. I can say ta preet 123. Hopefully, if I did everything right, it should work. Oh, Jeebus. Login is not a function. What is this? Handle login. User API login. Let's see what I did up. Oh, this exports default. Should just be like that. And yeah, this whole syntax is all jacked up. So if I refresh that, I can say ta preet 123. There we go. We have our token back with our user. This is being displayed on app.js line 23. App.js line 23. Next, what we can do, all right, so we got our data back. Now we can assign it to state. So we could say like, hey, if data has a token that comes back. So let's actually, before I do that, let's just console log what happens if I refresh this. So the user is no longer persistent into the React app. What if I type in something that's totally not valid? What do I get back? I get non-field errors, unable to log in with provided credentials. So only time a successful login occurs is when I get a token back. So I can do some logic here saying like, hey, if data.token exists, so if a token comes back, I can set is user logged in to true, and also set user to the data.user. So let's go ahead and do that. So if I do a test, so user's not logged in, and I can have some error handling on the front end if I wanted to, but right now I'm not going to do that right there. So notice how I submitted it, and then the login page says the state changed in the user component. Therefore, the login component, the login component page re-rendered, and now the user is logged in as true, and now we have the username with the ID of 1 with the username of password, or with the username TA Preet.
Tom, I don't remember, was TA Preet, is that what you put in as your Django super user, or did you create another user?
Correct, that's my super user.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And we can even add some conditional rendering in my login app or login page to say like, hey, the very top, if props.is logged in, I can return a div that has a link to the home page or something. So when I log in, 1, 2, 3, now I can go to the home page. But ideally, I might want to have a log out button. But notice how my user doesn't persist. See, login is false, etc. So what's one way we can have the user persist?
Is there a way to set it on a timer?
When you say set it on a timer, set what on a timer?
The token. Well, actually, I don't know now.
So we're not storing our token anywhere on the front end. Where can we store our token on?
Local storage.
Yep, just for simplicity purposes, I'm going to clear the local storage. So local storage. So right there, it's storage. There's nothing in there. So inside my app.js, where when I get a token, maybe I can set the local storage to something, maybe the token. So I can say local storage dot set item, and the set item takes in 2 values, which is the key and then the value of what I want. So I can say like auth user maybe, which is going to be, I guess I can just do data.token. So if I refresh that, go to local storage, 0, TA Preet, 1, 2, 3, submit, users logged in. I can go into local storage. There we go. We have our token right there. Now, if I refresh, I lose my user. It says user is not logged in. But if I type in local storage, I still have access to that token. So at some point, I can, anytime maybe I hit any page, such as the home page, or I can access the local token or the local storage token and grab a logged in user by passing that token in. So in the back end, in the core app, there's a URL called current user, which grabs the current user that's logged in. So I can utilize that inside my app.js, or I'm sorry, inside my login or my user API by say like const get logged in user. And then what I need to get a logged in user is the user token. So I can extract that somehow from the local host or local storage. So I can do, let's make this an async and let response. I'm gonna copy this whole thing down. I'm just gonna copy this down. And instead of using the body, because we're not passing anything into the body, we need to pass in authorization. Is that how you spell it? Authorization. In here. So for the authorization, this is where we want to pass in the token. So we can say it's going to be a JavaScript web token, and we're going to pass in the token in here. And you don't necessarily need to do physically pass in the token from the front end, because you can access the local storage here as well. But for this purpose, I'm going to actually physically pass in the local storage token from the app.js. So that URL that I need to go to is core/current user, I believe it is. Is that right? Current user, so it's got a current user. Cool. Questions about grabbing a current logged in user or this API?
Hey Tom, I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. The reason why we store that everything on local storage is because we cannot preserve state. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
Because anytime we refresh, state gets lost in our React app.
I see. And also, instead of just storing the token, can we store the entire user, every information on local storage, so we don't have to have this async await function anymore? We can just grab everything we need from user from local storage.
So, like grabbing the username and ID, etc.
Right, that's correct.
But with that, you can, but then how? But let's see why you can't do it. I'm drawing a blank. You'll still have to set that to state. But essentially, you can do that, but the backend won't authorize you to access that data without a token. So the token is the main credential at verifying whether or not you have access to different API endpoints on the backend.
Okay, that makes sense. So token's probably the most important identification.
Yes. All right. So we have this user API, get logged in user. I'm going to go ahead and export that as well. And now, maybe every time we visit the main app, we'll want to call this get logged in user just to see whether or not that a user exists. So I can say, so get logged in user. I can say, I'm going to create another method called get user. That is an async. Yep. And when do I want to call this get logged in user API?
Probably any time the page changes, right?
Anytime the page changes, I'll want to
Do
call
you use
that.
effect to run at one time on page load?
Yep. So I'll definitely be executing this API anytime the sorry, I just drew a blank. So essentially, anytime I log in, I'm going to call this get user method, which is may or may not call this get logged in user API. So what I actually want to do, so let's just say let's response equals await user API dot get logged in user, and how do I grab the token? So what I want to pass in to this get user login get logged in user method is the token. So I can literally pass in local storage.get item, and the name of the item is auth user, because down here I'm setting that auth user to local storage. Does that make sense? What questions do you have about how I'm grabbing the value out of local storage?
So auth user will be unique on each individual's browser. There will be a key of auth user.
Correct.
Okay.
And then we can say let data equals await dot response dot JSON. And then again, we can pretty much do the same thing down here, minus this part, because technically it's already in local storage. But what if it's not in local storage initially? So what if this item isn't on in local storage the first time it hits? So what I can do is say, hey, if local storage dot get item auth user does not equal null, then I can execute this API. Because I don't want to execute this API unless there is a token in local storage. So that's why use effect, not user effect. The use effect method, this is where I actually want to call use effect. So I can say, I can actually call this get user method. Every time it loads, anytime I go to do a refresh, it calls this get user. I can grab the user from the database. And I only want to do it once, so I'm just going to leave an empty string there. So I can say console log use effect just to see. See right here, it says core current user. So unauthorized, it's probably because my token expired. So I can go to login. Use effect is called once. It calls that get current. Even though it's there, it might be expired. So I can say TA preet 123. Submit. User is logged in. Now every time I refresh, why does it say that? Current user method not allowed.
Does your use effect have to be an async as well?
No, it shouldn't have to be. Let's see, why is that happening? Local storage, get item. Current user. Auth user. Auth user. Let's look at here.
Do you have to say user API dot get user?
So I'm using get user login right here. So it's calling this. Not allowed. I just want to see. No, it's still not working. Get user login. Let's see, token, API, local storage, get item, console log, local storage dot get item. Actually, I'm just gonna console log the token up here. Make sure the token is in fact being passed in. I can refresh that. There's that token. User API 14.
Just curious, is it because why is that a method a post method? Does that make any difference?
Oh, yep, that's exactly why. If I refresh it, yay, it worked. So I'm not getting an error. Thank you. So yeah, it shouldn't be a post method. It's a get method. All right. So set user login. Initially it's false. Go to home / login. Right there. But why isn't set user login? So we're getting the current user, passing that in. TA pread 1, 2, 3. Now we do a hard refresh. See, now it says user logged in is false. Let's see if something happened. So we may have console log is logged in, user right there. And I'm gonna get rid of, so logged in is false, TA pread 1, 2, 3. App.js is true. Logged in. All right. It's still not working. Just say user. It's working yesterday. Let's see what's going on. Grabbing the all right.
Is it because it's printing the user object before it calls use effect?
Printing the user object before it's calling use effect. It should login page. It's probably because of this. So is logged in. But it's not updating the login page after we get the user and set it.
I think in local storage, did we only store the token? Did we ever store the is logged in true or false value?
No, we don't need to do that, because once we grab the local storage or grab the user, let's actually look at it should automatically update the set is logged in to true and set the user. So if I go to login, JWT 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, it's because I think once you type something in the URL, you hit enter, that's treated as a refresh.
It should. We have the event prevent default. Go to home. Login. So app.js line 23. Right here. So we actually get the data there. Oh, I see. So it only returns the user. So I see what's going on. So right here, it's only returning the user. It's not returning the token for the get logged in user because it's already assuming, or it already knows that we already have the token. So right here is, I've got my logic wrong. So I can say, hey, if the data contains the username, right, like so, and let's just return the data. So good. That's what I get for copying and pasting from. All right. So let's try this again. Pre login. If I refresh, oh, it's still doing that. What the hell? Let's see. Oh, I'm an idiot. I'm gonna get it right eventually. There we go. See, now it's automatically logging me in and setting the user to true. And it's okay if that's like a loading thing, because it's initially it doesn't have state and then it updates the state and refreshes or re-renders. Cool. Questions about that?
What did you change there to get that working?
So the data that I'm getting back from the get logged in user, so that response is literally just an object with the username and ID. Whereas when I initially log in, I get a token back, a token with another keyword of user that is the object. So I can console log data just kind of show you the differences and why that logic needs to be a little bit different. So I'm going to clear the local storage just to start fresh, clear. Now I can refresh there and go to login. So this is, I've never logged in before. It's totally fresh. I can say TA preet, 1, 2, 3. So this is what's being returned when I initially log in, which is the token and the user, which is an object of with an ID and the username. That's down here. That's what I'm console logging on line 40. And then I'm saying, hey, if there's a token that comes back with the response, which there is, set that token on local storage and then update the state to is logged in to true and set the user to that user object, which is just the ID and username. And when I refresh, so if I go home and if I go to login, now what I get back on line, where is it? Line 23 in app.js. So line 23 in app.js, I just get the user object back. And so it doesn't include that token or anything else. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So next, let's create the handle logout first. So const handle log out. Or before I do that, let's go ahead and take a 11-minute break, be back at 11:10, and we'll jump into handling the logout feature or capabilities and the signing up. Yeah, be back at 11:10.
Hey, Tom.